Hi everyone, I'm Jeremy Reeves, head blender of Cornell & Diehl Pipe Tobacco Company, and today for Cornell & Diehl's tobacco selections, we're going to be talking about a type of tobacco that can be maybe a little misunderstood. That's Black Cavendish. Many people have expressed to me that when they see Black Cavendish in a blend description, that they automatically assume that the tobacco must be an aromatic. Or that it's going to be very, very sweet, and maybe that's not something that they're interested in. But what a lot of people may not realize is that Black Cavendish, while it can be certainly used as the base for a blend, or even the entirety of the tobacco in a blend, and have a fruity or a really sweet kind of syrupy sauce added to it to make an aromatic, what you might not realize is that Black Cavendish can be used to really great effect in very small quantities that the smoker may not even realize is the result of Black Cavendish. In fact, the smoker may not even realize that there is Black Cavendish in the blend. So whenever you see something in a blend description, it's good to think about whether or not those tobaccos are necessarily in large quantity in the blend. I think a lot of times Cornell & Diehl errs on the side of overt honesty, giving all of the tobacco components that comprise a particular blend. But I think that there may be some instances where you might be surprised that there is Black Cavendish in this blend, given or in a particular blend, given the way that blend tastes. So let's talk about first how Black Cavendish is made. This U.S. Black Cavendish we use in a wide variety of our products, and to be completely honest, most of them are in quantities less than 1 ounce per pound. So using this Cavendish in really, really tiny quantities, such that it might get easily lost in the mix if you were picking through and trying to find it. The reason for that is because Black Cavendish can offer depth of smoke. It can offer weight on the palate. It can offer volume of smoke that helps to spread the flavors of the other more prominent tobaccos in a blend across your palate more evenly. So I've used this example before. Many of you that have heard it before, I apologize, but this may be new to some of you. I compare the way that oftentimes we use Black Cavendish in a blend to the purpose of flour in a roux. So the purpose of making a roux is so that you can make a really dense, thick stock that is going to be a soup base or a sauce base that you're going to add a bunch of other flavors to, and the purpose of the flour is to be thickening, so that those many different flavors will actually stick on your palate and fill your mouth, and slowly you're able to taste all of the things that have gone into this stock or broth or sauce, rather than leaving the sauce or stock or broth very thin, where you might miss out on some of the complexities of all the different flavors that have been introduced into it. So we use Black Cavendish the same way. It helps to just densen and thicken the smoke, so that the flavors of the different tobaccos that make up more prominently the blend that you're enjoying, those things can be spread across your palate, and you're able to actually appreciate them more. Black Cavendish can be used to soften rough edges of a blend, and there's a few instances that immediately come to mind where that was the specific purpose that I wanted to use it for. And so again, really tiny quantities, but just a little bit, and particularly in blends where there is pressure, or in blends where it's going to spend some time in a tin. That can be used to kind of just take the little edge off of a tobacco that may be a little rough around the edges. That's the way that I used it, for example, in Kelly's Coin, which is predominantly dark burley. Far and away the majority of that tobacco is dark burley, but there are little dribs and drabs of other things so that the flavor could remain quintessentially dark burley, but that some of the rough edges and some of the less interesting aspects of just smoking straight dark burley might have been mitigated a little bit. I added a small amount of Virginia to introduce a small amount of sweetness, and I added a little bit of black Cavendish just to take the subtle edge off of that dark burley, which, because of its high nicotine content, can be a little sharp. So black Cavendish on its own, straight, subtly sweet and just ever so slightly tangy. It is made by using U.S. grown burley that has been treated with some combination of heat, steam, and pressure. Different companies use different techniques, but those are the basic building blocks of blackening a tobacco. So some companies use burley-based tobaccos, some companies use Virginia-based tobaccos. We'll see later in this video a tobacco that is quite unique for black Cavendish, but burley is the quintessentially American black Cavendish. It doesn't have a whole lot of flavor on its own. It burns very, very cool. It doesn't take a lot of effort to keep it lit. It can really make an impact in the way that you sense the smoke in your mouth. You can really feel the smoke of black Cavendish in your mouth more than you taste it. The taste, again, is very subtle. It's only slightly sweet. Makes it very good for if you wanted to use it in a base blend and add an aromatic sauce to it of some kind, but it can also go widely unnoticed in small quantities where really all it's doing is adding a little volume to the smoke. So that's the rundown of the U.S. black Cavendish that we use. Some examples of blends, I already mentioned Kelly's Coin, but some examples of other blends that are decidedly not aromatic that do use black Cavendish in really small portions and that you might be surprised to know that there's black Cavendish there. I would suggest you try Riverboat Gambler. It's a very rich burley blend with a little bit of Oriental and some Perique. It has sort of a cigar character to it, but it does have a small amount of black Cavendish in it. Country Lawyer is another cigar blend that we make for Briarworks, and that cigar leaf really works well with a little bit of this U.S. black Cavendish, just adding extra body and depth to the blend. Kelly's Coin I mentioned before, and then Bow-Legged Bear. Again, small quantity of black Cavendish. The overall flavor profile is that of Burley, Virginias, Perique, and Latakia. So some examples of some decidedly non-aromatic tobaccos that do contain black Cavendish. Let's move on now to our next black Cavendish product that I wanted to talk to you about today. All right, so the next Cavendish that I wanted to talk to you about is, it's pretty unique. It's actually from the Dominican Republic, and rather than the more common types of Cavendish like we discussed before, being either burley-based or in some instances Virginia-based, like the classic English brown Cavendish, this Cavendish is actually made using cigar leaf grown in the Dominican Republic. So the manufacturer that makes this black Cavendish also manufactures cigars, and at the end of the day, manufacturing cigars, there are always a bunch of cut ends and unusable pieces just because of size of cigar leaf that you can't really do anything else with, and their option for turning it into something that is usable is to shred it and blacken it, which is pretty interesting. It's pretty unique, and I'm not aware of anybody else that is using this particular Cavendish. But it has a very subtle cigar-like flavor, and rather than the subtle tangy sort of sweetness that the Burley U.S. Cavendish has, this has a very subtle, more earthy kind of cocoa or chocolatey sort of sweetness. It's really pleasant to smoke, and has all of the same sort of, you know, softening and smoke illuminate or invigorating effects. You know, it can make the smoke more voluminous, but it plays to that earthier flavor profile, whereas the other Cavendish, it can be a little chameleonic, but it definitely has a slight tartness to it, a slight tang to it, and just a very subtle sweetness. So in small quantities, this can really go unnoticed when paired with Burleys or with earthier red Virginias. It's going to be a little more pronounced if you put a large portion of it with bright leaf. You're going to notice this sort of like sweet and earthy balance that begins to happen. I've used this Cavendish though to really great effect with Perique as well, and a main example that I would use is in the blend that I worked on with Kyle Gellis, King Stride. So there is a fairly robust hand of Perique in that blend, alongside some Burleys and some Virginias. But this black Cavendish melds so beautifully with the Perique and just takes on the flavor of the Perique and just spreads it out so that the Perique is not overpowering in its strength, but the flavor remains very front and center. It's a fantastic tobacco, and I love working with it. Big plumes of smoke, virtually no sensation other than the feeling of smoke, the weight of the smoke on my palate, and just a very subtle kind of chocolatey sweetness. It's a very amicable flavor, and while it's pleasant to smoke straight, it's inobtrusive. In a blend, it works the same way. It does not make itself clearly known or recognized. Rather, it works beautifully with the tobaccos around it to create a more pleasing sensation to the smoker. So hope this has kind of debunked some ideas maybe that some of you have had about Black Cavendish, and maybe it's invigorated your own creativity if you are a home blender, ways to use Black Cavendish in a blend. I hope that the next time you see Black Cavendish in a tin description, that maybe you think to yourself, I shouldn't just write that off, I should give it a try. Odds are it's probably in a really small portion that you may not notice at all. Thanks very much, guys. I hope you enjoyed this, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time on C&D's Tobacco Selections. Bye-bye.